Alien Huntress drains life from everything. Human operative grows stronger under her deadly touch. The cockpit alarms blared, each warning pulse a knife through Cade's skull, but he barely registered them over the shriek of wind tearing through the fractured hull. Glass cracked in a spiderweb above his head, cold air slicing across his cheeks, stinging the split in his brow. The controls were dead in his grip. Useless levers and switches, no more effective than holding back a tidal wave with his hands. The planet below, Vera 4, shrouded in cobalt storms, dragged his crippled ship inexorably downward, magnetic tendrils pulling at the battered metal like a predator hauling prey to its lair. Warning lights flickered across his battered features, painting his clenched jaw in shifting red and amber. Muscles bunched in his forearms as he fought the useless yoke, jaw locked in defiance. Gravity pressed him into the pilot's seat, threatening to weld him there forever, every bone in his body vibrating with the scream of descent. The hull vibrated around him, frame shaking itself apart in a dirge of metal fatigue and failing seals. He didn't see the ground approach. He felt it. The world shattered with a bone-deep crack, and pain exploded through him, sharp and blinding. The impact stole his breath, then stole his consciousness in a tide of agony and darkness. He awoke to silence, a silence so absolute it seemed wrong, broken only by the faint crackle of damaged electronics. Emergency lighting struggled to life, bathing the twisted wreck in a cold, ghostly glow. Shadows hung thick in the ruined cockpit, dancing over shattered panels and dangling wires. Training kicked in, instincts hammered by years as a security operative. Cade's hands moved before thought. He ran fingers over his limbs, grimacing at bruises blossoming beneath the skin, scrapes burning on his temple and knuckles. Nothing broken. He could work with that. He forced his mind to catalog threats, filtering the haze of pain and adrenaline for what mattered most. The first threat wasn't the hiss of leaking coolant or the tang of scorched metal. It was the smell. Something sweet and feral, cloying, overlaying the usual sense of disaster. Beneath that, a sourness, rot, tinged with something animal. He coughed, eyes narrowing, and reached for his sidearm before forcing the battered hatch open. He crawled from the wreckage, boots scraping through tangled metal, and emerged into Vera's alien dusk. The landscape seized his attention, a fever dream brought to life. Jagged towers of black glass rose in sharp silhouettes, catching the dying light and throwing it back in sickly fractured patterns. The sky churned with rust and blue, clouds colliding in electric swirls, casting the ground in an eerie glow. Fungi clustered in dense mats along the cracks in the earth, their bulbs pulsing with sickly orange light, casting elongated shadows that seemed to shift when he wasn't looking. The ground beneath his boots crunched, brittle and sharp, fragments snapping like brittle bone. He looked down, saw not just the remains of plants, but actual bones, stripped clean and arranged in careful spirals around the crash site. Skulls watched from the periphery, some unmistakably human, others stretched and alien, hollow eye sockets following his every move. A voice cut through the gloom, smooth as velvet and edged with threat. Another trespasser, eager to be devoured. Cade spun, sidearm drawn and aimed, eyes sweeping the shadows. The voice was close, dangerously close. From the murk stepped a figure that seemed carved from Vera's own myth. Skin a deep cobalt blue, catching the emergency lights in waves, eyes burning with incandescent orange, alive with secrets. Hair a wild mane of living fire, licking at the air with every movement. Two horns, dark and curved, arched from her brow, framing a face that was both fierce and mesmerizing, beauty honed to a predator's edge. Her armor was a second skin, black chased with gold, hugging her lithe form and moving with predatory grace. Each motion radiated threat and allure in equal measure, as if she were both queen and executioner. "I am Lysara," she announced, her voice a challenge, each syllable thrumming with power. "And you are prey." She reached out, her hand tipped with onyx claws that glinted in the dying light. Cade braced for pain, for the end, but instead, her touch sent a surge of energy flooding through him, a torrent of heat and power racing through his veins. His vision sharpened, breath catching as the world around him blazed with impossible clarity. He felt every nerve awaken, senses stretched taut as bowstrings. Lysara recoiled, eyes wide with confusion and something like fear. "What are you?" she whispered, her tone stripped of bravado. Cade flexed his hand, marveling at the rush. Details leapt out of the gloom. The intricate gold filigree along her armor, the subtle shimmer of her blue skin, the wild pulse of her aura. "Human," he replied, his voice steady, grounding himself in the word. "But maybe that means more than I thought." She circled him, movements wary, cat-like. Her eyes never left his, studying, measuring. "My touch is fatal," she said. "No one survives it. Why do you?" He holstered his weapon, pulse still racing with the energy she'd given him, feeling it coil and twist beneath his skin. "Maybe we're not enemies," he said, taking a cautious step closer. "Maybe we're something else entirely." Her laugh was low, mocking, but beneath it was a note of intrigue. "You think to charm a huntress human? To turn death into desire?" He met her gaze, feeling a strange resonance, magnetic, dangerous between them. "Maybe you're as curious as I am." She let him close, her breath warm and charged on his skin. "Curiosity can be fatal. Sometimes it's worth the risk," he murmured, hand reaching for her face. She caught his wrist, grip unyielding, and the contact sent another wave of energy arcing through them both. Sparks leapt between their skin, visible in the dim painting wild shadows across the bones. "You meddle with forces you don't understand," she warned, refusing to let go. "Then teach me," he challenged, twisting free and capturing her hand in his. The energy surged again, brighter, hotter, a current that crackled along their joined palms. She sprang back, horns gleaming in the spectral light, stance low and predatory. "If you wish to survive, prove you're worthy." She lunged, swift as shadow and just as silent. Cade dodged, adrenaline and borrowed power fueling his reflexes. He caught her arm as she swept past, and the touch knocked them both off balance, sending them tumbling among the spirals of bones. Each contact amplified the strange connection, electricity singing along nerves and bone. "What are we becoming?" she gasped, breathless, eyes wide in shock and hunger. "Something new," he replied, voice raw, overwhelmed by the intensity surging between them. She pressed her hands to his chest, heat burning through the fabric, threatening to ignite something deep within. "My people tell stories of the unity, a myth where hunter and hunted become one." "Maybe myths have a purpose," he said, hands tracing the delicate gold filigree, then the living heat beneath her armor. Her horns brushed his cheek as she leaned in, her armor shifting, forming a cocoon around them both. "If I lose control," she whispered, lips brushing his ear, voice trembling with need and warning, "I could consume you entirely." "And if I lose control," he murmured, fingers tracing the base of her horns, feeling her shudder, "I might not want you to stop." Her body pressed closer, her breath catching. "This is madness," she breathed, words a shiver against his skin. "Then let's be mad together." His lips found the curve of her throat, her response a low, feral growl of surrender. They moved together among the bones, heat and energy building. Two predators discovering a new kind of hunger, one neither wanted to escape. In the chaos of Veyra's dusk, as the storms raged above, Cade and Lysara gave in to a wild, electric unity, forging something that had never existed before. Veyra's dawn painted the sky in molten gold and stormy blue, bands of color rippling through the clouds like wounds that refused to close. Cade woke alone, the cold press of the alien morning pulling him from uneasy dreams. He blinked, shivering as unfamiliar energy thrummed just beneath his skin. When he looked down, he found his body marked with glowing patterns, lines and sigils that seemed alive, pulsing softly with every heartbeat. They echoed the ornate designs on Lysara's armor, tracing his arms, chest, even the curve of his throat. He flexed his fingers, watching the light ripple and dance beneath his skin. Power still hummed in his veins, not painful, but electric, a presence that both comforted and unsettled him. Cade stood, every movement guided by that new energy. The remnants of the crash site lay silent behind him, the bones and spirals undisturbed in the strange morning light. Above, the sky seethed, yet the horizon had changed. The city revealed itself at last. Towers of black glass rose from the plain, arching high, their surfaces glistening with storm water and shifting with an inner illumination. Organic curves met razor-sharp edges, as if the city itself were alive, breathing, waiting. Lysara appeared between two jagged stones, her stride sure, but her eyes clouded with something he hadn't seen before. Uncertainty. She stopped a few paces away, the wild fire of her hair flickering low, her horns catching the light like obsidian. "The Synod has summoned us," she said, each word heavy, edged with unspoken questions. "You will come." Cade studied her, reading the wariness in her stance, the way her fingers hovered near the hilt at her hip. "Your people aren't known for hospitality. We judge. We adapt. We destroy threats," Lysara replied, her horns tilting in agitation, gold glinting along the spiral ridges. "You are something we cannot classify." He nodded, accepting the truth in her words. "So I'm an anomaly. That usually doesn't end well for the anomaly." She almost smiled, almost, but the tension remained. Not if it can teach us something new. They walked together toward the city, the landscape changing beneath their feet. The ground pulsed with bioluminescent veins, bands of indigo and amber crawling outward from the city's heart. Each step awakened new patches of light, as if the planet itself were watching, responding. Fungi arched from the earth, curling toward them, sensing their heat. The spirals of bone faded behind them, replaced by living crystal, growths that glittered with internal fire. Cade glanced sideways at Lysara. "Tell me about your kind," he said, voice low, careful. She kept her gaze forward, expression distant. "We are the Varen. We feed on life's essence, growing stronger with each conquest. It has always been so." She hesitated, that word, always, catching on her tongue. Some elders remember a time before the hunger, but memory fades after centuries. What matters is survival. He caught the ache in her words, the longing for something she could not name. "You sound tired of it." She looked at him then, a flicker of pain crossing her fierce features. "You cannot imagine what it is to hunger endlessly. To know every joy is bought with another's end, but the cycle does not break." As they neared the city, Cade saw how alien it truly was. The structures were not built but grown, living crystal twisted into impossible shapes, towers and bridges that curved organically, yet with the implacable sharpness of a predator's fang. Walls pulsed with inner light, each pane shifting in color as they passed. The air vibrated with distant music, a low keening that set his new markings aglow. Other Varen watched them from balconies and archways, their gazes hungry and bright. Some were cobalt blue like Lysara, others deep violet, their armor chased in patterns of bone and gold. They moved with the same predatory grace, never still, eyes tracking Cade as if calculating his worth, or his flavor. "They fear you," Lysara noted, her voice a mixture of pride and anxiety, her horns angled in a subtle gesture of warning to the onlookers. "They should," Cade replied, and as he brushed his hand against hers, the contact sent a visible ripple of energy through both their bodies. The surge was bright and unmistakable, dancing across his glowing marks and sparking along her armor. The crowd recoiled, some in fear, others in awe. Lysara drew herself taller, leading him through the city's winding heart. The Synod will want answers. Speak carefully. They reached the city's center, where the towers ringed a wide amphitheater, steps carved from black glass and living crystal. The air hummed with anticipation, the crowd thick and silent. Carvings adorned the walls, ancient hunts, spirals of bone, stylized predators and prey caught in endless pursuit. At the amphitheater's center stood the matron, Malus, towering and regal. Her skin was a blue so deep it was almost black, her eyes burning with the orange fire of judgment. Her horns spiraled high and wide, draped in gold and bone, marking her as something ancient, unchallenged. She stood with hands clasped before her, power radiating from her in palpable waves. So, Malus intoned, her voice resonant, fixing Cade with a burning gaze. This is the anomaly. She circled them slowly, every step measured, the crowd tense with anticipation, breaths held as if one word might unleash violence. In all our history, she continued, eyes never leaving Cade, none have survived Lysara's touch. Yet you stand, not only alive, but changed. Cade met her gaze, refusing to flinch. Changed is one word for it, he said, watching the crowd carefully. Their mood was uncertain, more curiosity than bloodlust, at least for now. You think yourself chosen, Malus said coldly, eyes narrowing. You know nothing of what you risk. Lysara moved closer to Cade, her body a shield, horns angled protectively toward the matron and the watching assembly. He seeks understanding, matron. Perhaps that serves us better than destruction. Malus made a slight gesture, and the amphitheater's carvings shimmered. The surface of the black glass rippled, resolving into a living mural. Figures emerged, not Varen, but the Makers, tall, impossibly graceful beings, their forms shifting, faces hidden by masks of living light. Scenes played out in silence, the Makers forging the Varen in bioluminescent vats, shaping them as perfect predators, the ultimate hunters designed to protect the Maker's domain. The mural shifted. Chaos. Destruction. The Makers vanished, but their creations endured, left alone to wander a galaxy that no longer needed them. The Varen hunted not out of duty, but out of hunger and the drive encoded in their bones. What destroyed the Makers? Cade asked, barely above a whisper. Entropy, Malus replied, her voice hard. Even gods fall. Their weapons remained. Us. The mural's images shifted again, spirals of DNA, intricate and glowing. At their center, unmistakably, was a human form. The crowd leaned in, a susurrus of disbelief rippling through them. No, Cade breathed, his skin crawling as the marks on his body pulsed brighter. Yes, Malus hissed, her tone a blade. The Makers built a failsafe, a species immune to our touch. Humanity. Cade felt Lysara press closer, her armor brushing his. You were meant to end us if we became a threat. The crowd erupted, shouts echoing against the crystalline walls. Some voices called for Cade's death, others demanded he be studied, dissected, his secrets torn free. The air vibrated with fear and hope, hunger and desperation. Lysara stood firm at Cade's side, her horns lowered in challenge as she glared at the gathering. He is not our enemy, she declared, voice ringing out over the chaos. He is our future. The debate raged. Malus's eyes narrowed, weighing the arguments, as Cade's pulse hammered in his ears. All around them, the Varen pressed closer, voices clashing, some demanding blood, others a new path. Then, abruptly, the air split with a high metallic whine. Engines, human engines, cut through the dawn, scattering the crowd as shadows streaked over the amphitheater. Cade and Lysara looked to the sky, the city's light reflected in the hulls of descending ships, the future hurtling toward them on wings of fire. A shuttle landed on the obsidian plain, its descent slicing the dawn air with a shriek of thrusters. The hull bore the stark insignia of the Terran Directorate, a stylized Earth encircled by wings, the mark of distant authority. Cade tensed, every muscle coiled, the glow of his new markings pulsing beneath his skin. Soldiers in composite armor fanned out, rifles raised and visors glinting, their movements crisp and rehearsed. Between them strode Agent Rix, tall and lean, his dark coat stirring in the dry wind. "Cade Mercer," Rix called, his voice carrying over the tense hush. "By order of the Directorate, you are to return for debrief." Cade stepped forward, Lysara at his side, Varen warriors closing in behind them, forming a living shield. His voice was edged with defiance. "Since when does the Directorate care about crash survivors?" Rick stopped just short of the defensive ring, hands clasped behind his back, eyes cold. "Since you started making alliances with dangerous xenoforms." He nodded toward Lysara, then the others, his gaze assessing. "Your crash was no accident." Lysara's claws gripped Cade's arm, energy flooding into him, their connection sparking in the morning light. The Varen ring tightened, eyes burning, horns lowered in warning. Tension crackled, a standoff painted in cobalt and gunmetal. A woman in a lab coat stepped forward, face alight with fascination. Dr. Mara Lin, Directorate Biologist. She ignored the weapons, her gaze fixed on Cade and Lysara. "The resonance effect is remarkable. Cellular enhancement, synchronized neural activity, emotional harmonics. The implications are—" Cade cut her off, anger flaring. "You've been spying on us, studying us like we're insects." Lysara's eyes blazed, the fire in her hair fanning higher. Her voice was low, dangerous. "You watch. You judge. But you do not understand." Rix's lips twisted in a thin, practiced smile. "Observation, not interference. The Varen were quarantined for study. Now, with your bond, their potential is unlocked." From the edge of the crowd, Melis's voice rang clear, slicing through the debate. "You see us as tools." Rix met the matron's gaze, unflinching. "Bioweapons," he said flatly. A human Varen pair could change the balance of power across half the sector. Lysara's grip tightened on Cade's arm, her energy pulsing hotter. "And if we refuse your leash?" Rix didn't hesitate. "You'll be neutralized." He lifted one hand. The soldiers responded instantly, weapons humming to life as they took aim. A heartbeat of silence, then chaos erupted. Weapons fired, plasma bolts searing the air. But Cade and Lysara moved as one, weaving through the onslaught with impossible speed. The connection between them amplified every sense, every reflex. Cade's vision narrowed, time stretching as he anticipated each shot, every movement. Lysara leapt ahead, claws deflecting blasts, her form a blur of cobalt and flame. The Varen warriors surged forward, driven by the resonance radiating from Cade and Lysara. Their bodies shimmered with bioluminescent energy, abilities flaring brighter, movements more coordinated than ever before. The humans fell back, discipline fraying in the face of the onslaught. Dr. Lin watched, awestruck, barely ducking as a stray shot scorched the ground near her boots. "They're adapting, cooperating in ways never seen before," she cried, her voice a blend of terror and scientific rapture. Rix barked orders, his voice growing desperate. "Retreat! Prepare orbital strike! If we can't have them, no one will!" The soldiers moved quickly, forming a perimeter as the shuttle's engines whined back to life, the ramp closing in a hiss of hydraulics. Cade and Lysara stood at the center of the shattered plain, the Varen gathering around them. The ground was scorched, obsidian glass melted to slag in places. Above, the shuttle lifted off, vanishing into the bruised sky. Melis approached, eyes flickering with new respect. Around her, the Varen watched Cade and Lysara not as outsiders, but as something else. Catalysts, perhaps, or a promise. Together, the pair stood taller, their energy a beacon in the growing gloom. "They see us now," Lysara said quietly, her hand still wrapped around Cade's. "Not as prey, as possibility." He nodded, watching the streak of the departing shuttle. "It changes everything." Dawn bled into morning, but the light brought no peace. The first warning came as a distant tremor, a thunder not of storms, but of orbital fire. High above, Directorate ships maneuvered into position, their shadows falling long across the city's towers. The bombardment began with a scream. White-hot lances of energy stabbed downward, melting crystal and glass, shattering bridges, setting the city alight. The Varen shrieked, scattering for cover. Cade grabbed Lysara's hand, pulling her toward the amphitheater as the ground shook, debris raining from above. Survivors poured into the carved depths, the amphitheater's ancient defenses flaring to life. Crystal walls thickened, spirals of bone slid into place, sealing the entrances. Malus led her people, horns glowing, voice commanding order amid panic. "They're driving us east," Cade observed, peering through a breach at the burning skyline. "Ground troops will be waiting on the far side of the city." Lysara pressed close, her armor flaring, a living shield against the tremors. "We have never fought as one, not in all our cycles. But with you, with us," Cade corrected, covering her hand with his own. "We're stronger together." The marks on his skin pulsed in response, matching the light in Lysara's eyes. A new barrage struck, the amphitheater shuddering as more of the city above melted, towers collapsing in rivers of molten crystal. The air was thick with heat and the taste of ash. Cade squinted through the smoky light, catching sight of a familiar formation on the horizon, gunships in a pincer movement, infantry deployed in staggered lines. He recognized the tactics instantly. "Commander Valen," he muttered. "Old Earth doctrine, classic encirclement." Malus's face was grim, her horns shadowed in the flickering gloom. "They fear what we're becoming. They fear change." He looked around at the battered survivors, the warriors and civilians pressed together, faces streaked with soot and determination. Lysara's hand was warm in his, her presence grounding him. He could feel their bond humming with power, the connection drawing in the Varen, amplifying their resolve. "Then we strike where they least expect," Cade said, voice rising above the clamor. "They want us to run. We attack." As the survivors rallied, a plan took shape in the embers, one born not of desperation, but of unity. Cade and Lysara navigated the chaos as a single entity, their movements so perfectly aligned it seemed they shared a single mind. Smoke and shrapnel filled the battered corridors of the city's underbelly as they led the survivors east, dodging fire, clearing debris, turning every obstacle into an advantage. Cade's strength was not just physical, it was a steadiness, a sense of direction that cut through panic. He hauled slabs of black glass aside with inhuman ease, carving paths for families and fighters alike. Lysara's energy bent the world around them, her every gesture warping gravity, her luminous horns disrupting the targeting sensors of the Directorate drones circling above. Their unity was contagious. The Varen fell in behind them, faces streaked with ash and determination, their powers sparking brighter in Cade and Lysara's wake. Warriors leaped higher, struck harder, minds linked by a resonance that grew stronger with every heartbeat. Even the elders found new vigor, their voices joining together in a rhythm older than the city itself. The human element had changed the equation, given hunger a purpose, and instinct a direction. Above the battle, aboard the command ship, the Terran fleet's officers watched their screens in disbelief. Human tactics, flanking, cover fire, feints, were being executed by Varen fighters with a precision that left seasoned soldiers reeling. "They're evolving," Dr. Lin reported to her comm, eyes wide as data cascaded over her displays. The human element is driving rapid adaptation. Neural pathways are forming new connections. Entire combat doctrines are being assimilated. On the ground, at the shattered edge of the eastern ruins, the Directorate's final line held behind portable shields. Commander Valen waited there, the city's molten skyline reflected in his visor. He had expected desperate survivors, scattered, demoralized, easy prey for orbital superiority. Instead, he faced a force unified by a power he could neither quantify nor control. He raised his voice through the comm grid, projecting authority. "You can't win," he declared from behind the humming blue wall of shields. "We have orbital superiority. The next strike will level everything from here to the mountains." Cade stepped forward, Lysara at his side, energy crackling between their joined hands. The air shimmered with possibility. "You have targets," Cade replied, the words echoing with calm certainty. "We have each other." For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then, as if the word itself was a trigger, Cade and Lysara launched their assault. It was a dance more than a battle. Lysara surged forward, her horns a corona of living fire, energy rippling from her hands. She struck the shields, sending arcs of power skittering across their surface, disrupting their coherence. Cade darted through the gaps, every weakness in the human line clear to him as if painted in light. He disarmed soldiers with brutal efficiency, redirected their fire, and slipped through their ranks with impossible speed. The Varen pressed the advantage, moving in perfect synchrony with their leaders. The shield wall buckled. Commander Valen fired his sidearm, but Lysara's energy flicked the shot aside. Cade was there in a blink, wrenching the weapon free and pinning the commander to the ground. The battle was over in moments. When Valen's command signal fell silent, the fleet's resolve fractured. Above, in the flagship's command center, new orders crackled through the static. A new voice, cold and absolute, cut across all frequencies. "This is Admiral Solis of the Terran cruiser Resolute. All non-human vessels withdraw immediately. This is now a Directorate matter." But on the ground, as Cade and Lysara stood surrounded by the survivors, power humming between them, it was clear the old rules no longer applied. Every soldier, every Varen, every survivor saw it. The boundaries that had defined the conflict were gone. They were something new now, something beyond human, beyond Varen, and the universe trembled on the edge of that realization. The Directorate's next weapon was not kinetic or plasma, it was knowledge, Doctor. Lin's research, gathered in secret, had been weaponized. Drones dropped from the clouds, hovering low, their sensors humming as they unleashed rippling waves of energy. The target was not the body, but the bond. "The resonance is stabilizing, shared consciousness forming," Lin reported, her voice tight with scientific awe and dread. "If the frequency holds, they'll become a singular entity. But if disrupted..." Cade felt it instantly, a shudder in his mind, a ripple that blurred the line between his thoughts and Lysara's. Her instincts crashed through his awareness, the scent of ozone, the feel of each heartbeat in the crowd, the urge to protect, to devour, to transform. His own memories spilled outward, home, sunlight, laughter, loss. They were evolving, their connection deepening, but the disruption was a razor at the edge of every thought. Lysara's grip on his hand tightened as pain flickered through their link. "They're trying to sever us," she gasped, her voice a mix of anger and fear. Cade steadied her, drawing on every lesson of discipline and focus he'd ever learned. "Hold on. Remember who we are." She nodded, eyes blazing, but then her gaze shifted to the broken murals behind the lines, ancient glyphs etched in bone and crystal. Her breath caught, and she moved to study them, fingers tracing the spirals, eyes wide with sudden realization. "There's a way to free my people," Lysara said, her voice trembling between hope and dread. "The Makers left a protocol, here, in these glyphs. It can reverse what was done to us, undo the hunger, Give us choice again. Cade's heart twisted. The possibility hung between them, sharp and bittersweet. If we use it, he said quietly, we lose this. Our connection, everything we've become. She looked at him, searching his face for doubt, for fear. My people would be free to choose their fate, she replied, her hand warm in his. Isn't that worth any price? He didn't answer at first. The city above was burning, the fleet waiting, every path shadowed by loss. The Varen gathered, their voices a storm of debate. Some called for the glyphs to be activated, others feared what freedom might cost. The power that had bound them for centuries, hunger, unity, invincibility, would be gone, replaced by uncertainty. A new figure stepped forward. Zira, Lysara's longtime rival, her violet skin streaked with soot and blood. Some of us want to move forward, not backward, Zira declared, her eyes bright with defiance. We have become more than what the Makers intended. Why give that up? Melis, the matron, countered, her presence like a shadow over the gathering. Our nature was stolen. The Makers shaped us to serve their ends, not our own. Will we reclaim our birthright, or embrace what we have become, predators without purpose? The crowd fractured, voices rising. Warriors and elders, young and old, argued fiercely, the future of a people balanced on the edge of a decision none had ever truly had the right to make. Cade felt the pressure mounting, the eyes of two worlds fixed on the choice he and Lysara represented. At the center of the storm, Lysara turned to him, her face pale with longing and fear. If we choose freedom, we lose us, she said, her voice trembling. Cade squeezed her hand, letting the energy between them flow, luminous and uncertain. Or maybe, he said, hope threading his words, there's another way. Something neither the Makers nor the Directorate ever imagined. Their palms met, the glyphs and resonance blazing around them. At their touch, the energy between them shifted, no longer just power, but potential. It waited, silent and infinite, for their choice. In the ancient archive, light flickered along the crystal walls, an otherworldly pulse that matched the beat of two hearts, and countless more. Cade and Lysara stood at the archive's core, surrounded by glyphs and spirals etched in living stone, the air thick with the electric tang of possibility. Their hands were joined, palms pressed together, the resonance of their bond echoing through every fiber of the ancient chamber. Glyphs awakened at their touch, bands of color swirling in patterns both alien and strangely familiar. As their consciousnesses meshed, Cade's tactical insight sharpened, parsing the layered logic of the Maker's code. Contingency plans, genetic keys, encrypted instructions hidden beneath centuries of myth and fear. Lysara's energy manipulation guided his thoughts through the labyrinth, her senses mapping every pulse and sequence, her instinct for connection turning cryptic patterns into meaning. Together, they unraveled the truth. They built in flexibility, Cade breathed, awe in his voice. This isn't just a prison, it's a toolkit. Lysara's fingers tightened around his. We were never meant to be static. The Makers gave us the power to choose, what to keep, what to let go. She touched a glyph, and the archive responded, showing visions of Varen through the ages, warriors, healers, artists, explorers, each shaped by choices, not by destiny. Cade's mind raced, analyzing the possibilities. Every trait, the hunger, the predatory instinct, even the resonance, we can activate or suppress them. The code lets you rewrite yourselves. The revelation did not remain contained. Across the city's ruins and into the orbiting ships, a psychic shockwave rippled outward. Varen minds reeled, grasping at the sudden influx of possibility. Human observers, linked by their own technology, felt it too. A surge of data, emotion, and vision that defied categorization. On the Directorate command deck, Dr. Lin's voice crackled through the calm, feverish with discovery. They're rewriting their own biology in real time. This is unprecedented. The boundaries between species are collapsing. There's a feedback loop building. The fleet's patience, however, was far thinner than its curiosity. On the surface, panic and confusion spread among the Terran troops. In the flagship, Rix's expression hardened as he watched his command spiral out of control. Enough, he snapped, eyes fixed on the growing light from the city's heart. Initiate purge protocol. Wipe the site. Now. Sirens blared. Deep in orbit, bomb bays opened. Fusion warheads, sleek and humming, dropped from the sky, their fall turning night to dawn. They struck the city with apocalyptic force, vaporizing towers, melting obsidian streets into rivers of glass, sending shockwaves that fractured the very bedrock. But deep within the archive, Cade and Lysara stood unbowed. The energy of the bombardment poured into the ancient structure, every impact absorbed and redirected by bioluminescent veins that laced the walls and floors. The archive pulsed, growing brighter with each detonation. The glyphs burned with living fire, the spirals spinning outward, channeling the destruction into creation. Lysara's voice echoed in Cade's mind, a thought and a caress. We're not just surviving, we're transforming. Cade closed his eyes and let the energy flow through him, every atom alive with possibility. His awareness stretched, moving beyond his body, beyond the archive, linking with every Varen and even the terrified, awestruck humans above. He felt them all, their fear, their hope, their pain. He reached out, not as conqueror, but as bridge. Outside, the Varen staggered under the bombardment, expecting death and finding instead a new unity. The resonance, once confined to Lysara and Cade, now spread through the populace. Minds joined, sharing thoughts and emotions with a clarity that transcended language. The pain of loss became a shared burden, the dream of freedom, a chorus. Admiral Solis watched from her command throne, hands gripping the armrests until her knuckles blanched. On the main screen, the city refused to die. Instead, it glowed ever brighter, the archive at its heart radiating energy like a second sun. They're absorbing the energy, she whispered, voice tinged with awe and dread. The human is at the center. What have we unleashed? Dr. Lin stared at her readouts, voice barely audible. It's the unity, the myth, they're evolving, right in front of us. Rix, sweat beading on his brow, slammed his fist on the console. What do we do against gods? Desperation laced his words, the certainty of command stripped away. The attack intensified. More warheads rained down, each explosion feeding the archive's heart. Inside, Cade and Lysara only grew stronger, their awareness encompassing the city, the fleet, the planet itself. Their bond became a network, a lattice of shared consciousness into which every willing mind was drawn. They saw not only the present, but the potential futures branching outward. Lysara's presence was everywhere, her voice now a thought in every mind. This is our choice, she said, a resonance that was felt more than heard. To remain as we are, or become something new, to cling to hunger, or to embrace freedom. No one will be forced. Every soul decides for itself. Cade added his own thought, clear and resolute. To offer both. A choice for everyone. No more chains. No more fate dictated by fear. The energy within the archive reached a crescendo. Cade and Lysara, at its heart, focused their will, broadcasting visions to every mind within reach. Memories flowed, Lysara's first hunt, her longing for meaning beyond hunger. Cade's childhood on distant Earth, his quiet moments of wonder beneath alien stars. They showed possibilities, a Varen child choosing to become a healer, a Terran soldier laying down his rifle to teach, new cities rising where none had stood before. All across the battlefield, the visions took root. Varen warriors hesitated, seeing futures in which they shaped their own destinies. human soldiers felt old hatreds dissolve, replaced by empathy and the terrifying freedom of choice. The old boundaries, Veyron and human, hunter and prey, weapon and tool, blurred, then fell away. Within the archive, the glyphs responded, their light shifting from red to gold to an impossible blue. The spirals spun faster, reality itself seeming to bend as the code rewrote itself, not from above, but from within every connected soul. In orbit, silence fell. The Terran fleet ceased its fire, stunned into inaction by the tidal wave of transformation unfolding below. In that charged silence, Cade and Lysara stood together, hands joined, hearts open, offering the universe a new story, one of freedom, unity, and choice. The power between them was no longer just survival. It was evolution itself, a gift given freely to all who would claim it. Admiral Solis staggered, gripping the arms of his command chair as a tide of visions crashed into his mind. One instant, he was an officer, watching an enemy city burn through the eyes of orbiting satellites. The next, he was seeing through 1,000 memories, the Maker's cold calculations, the agony of Veyron creation, the long centuries of hunger and conflict. He saw himself as both witness and participant in a story written by others, humanity's role carefully planned, a species designed as a failsafe, but never free. Then, suddenly, the vision shifted, showing a future no longer shaped by manipulation, but by unbounded choice. All around him, the bridge crew reeled. Some gasped, hands pressed to temples. Others wept openly, torn between awe and terror. Solis drew a ragged breath, feeling his own mind expand beyond the limits of flesh and command. He saw Veyron and human, once enemies, now joined by a thread of something new. Not control, not subjugation, but a merging of will and hope. On the science vessel, Dr. Lin collapsed against her station, her face streaked with tears. The data streaming across her screen was unreadable, overridden by visions more real than anything her instruments could measure. She saw the beauty in the Veyron's evolution, the agony of their origin, and the terror of becoming more than human. She saw Cade and Lysara at the center of it all, their bond a lighthouse in the storm of change. The beauty of it, the possibility, was almost too much to bear. On the surface, the Veyrons stood in silent circles among the ruins, their minds newly open, their pasts revealed. Where once there had been suspicion, envy, and the bitter legacy of the Makers, now there was understanding. Each Veyron saw their origins not as a curse, but as a beginning, an opportunity to become more than what had been designed for them. And with that knowledge came choice. Some chose to remain part of the unity, their minds and souls linked in a network of empathy and shared will. Others felt the pull to return to their former selves, to reclaim the solitude and individuality they had been denied. Still others forged new paths, blending the old instincts with the new freedom, their forms shifting and changing with each decision. Across the system, Lysara's voice rang out, not as sound, but as a wave of thought, clear and impossible to ignore. "We are not your weapons," she declared, her message reaching every ship, every mind. "We are not your enemies. We are evolution, and we choose." The bombardment ceased. The rumble of fusion warheads died away, the sky above the shattered city falling silent. Human ships, once arrayed for destruction, now held their positions, stunned and uncertain. Down in the glowing heart of the archive, Cade and Lysara emerged, radiant with calm and power, the living symbols of a new age. Behind them, the Veyron were no longer divided. They were united by freedom, not by force, but by the courage to choose. Melis, regal and ancient, approached them, her blue-black skin shimmering with the light of the archive. Her eyes, once hard with the burden of command, now shone with something softer: pride, gratitude, hope. You have given us freedom, she said, voice trembling with emotion. Not with conquest, but with understanding. Zira stepped forward, her rivalry with Lysara forgotten, replaced by respect and a quiet awe. We choose our own future, she said. For the first time, it is ours to shape. A hush settled over the ruins. The human fleet hung above, uncertain, waiting for a cue. It came not from a threat, but from an offer. Dr. Lin's science vessel broke formation, descending gently through the glowing clouds. Her transmission cut through the static, her voice soft but firm. We want to learn, she said, not to control. This changes everything. Admiral Solis, recovered now, added his own message. The Directorate is reconsidering its stance. We are soldiers, but we are also explorers. Today, we witness something beyond war, something that demands a new kind of courage. This changes everything for us as well. Cade turned to Lysara, the chaos of battle and transformation falling away as peace settled between them. He took her hand, their fingers entwining not as accident, but as choice, deliberate, conscious, and filled with meaning deeper than any romance he had ever known. Their connection was no longer just energy or accident. It was the quiet certainty of belonging, of understanding another's heart, and carrying it alongside your own. He looked out over the city, at the Veyron rebuilding, the humans watching from above, the galaxy holding its breath. The real struggle was never us against them, Cade said, his voice carrying on the resonance that now linked so many. It was about control versus freedom. Today, freedom won. The skies of Vera 4, once storm-racked in crimson, now shimmered with new light. Veins of bioluminescence traced the rebuilt towers, the city's wounds healing in a glow of unity and hope. The Veyron moved with new purpose, working side by side, not as monsters, but as pioneers. Human envoys landed, not with weapons, but with open hands, eager to learn, to share, to find their place in the new order being forged beneath alien suns. The galaxy, once carved into territories of power and fear, now faced a crossroads, a choice to cling to old divisions, or to embrace the possibility of something more. Across the stars, whispers spread, of Vera's transformation, of the union between human and Veyron, of the dream that the makers of destiny could now shape it for themselves. Cade and Lysara stood together at the threshold of this new age, not as rulers, not as weapons, but as catalysts, proof that true strength was not in domination, but in unity, not in obedience, but in the courage to choose and to love without fear. Hand in hand, hearts joined, they faced the rising dawn. Their journey, and the galaxies, had only just begun. That's the end of the story. You can leave us a tip or become a channel member. This greatly helps our team improve the quality of our videos. You can send a tip using the Super Thanks button right below the video. We truly appreciate each and every one of you who has subscribed and supported us. Please do not forget to subscribe to our channel, like the video, and write in the comments what you liked most about this story. Our team will be very grateful to you. You can find even more fascinating stories on our channel. See you in the next video.